Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the shadowy chambers of medieval castles, where flickering candlelight reveals women grinding precious pearls into deadly powders and carefully dripping poison into their own eyes. You can almost hear the soft scraping of mortar against pestle, as these ladies of nobility prepare their daily beauty rituals. Rituals so bizarre and dangerous they would make modern cosmetic chemists flee in horror. The story may solve mysteries you never had an explanation for about why certain beauty standards seem so unnaturally extreme, and how our ancestors literally died for beauty in ways that make today's most extreme procedures look like child's play. So, before you explore the story with me, please take a moment to help me subscribe to the channel, like and share this video, or maybe leave a comment below. But make sure you do it when you really like what I bring to you. Feel free to let me know where and when you started watching this video, or maybe share a compliment about how these historical beauty stories make you feel grateful for modern skincare. Now, let's keep the lights as soft as possible. Turn on the fan for a gentle sound to help the story feel more emotional, and let's embark on tonight's journey together. You find yourself in the private chambers of Lady Eleanor de Montfort, watching as she carefully crushes a handful of pearls, each one worth more than a village blacksmith's entire yearly earnings. The year is 1347, and you're witnessing a beauty routine that would cost approximately $50,000 in today's money. She grinds these lustrous treasures into the finest powder imaginable, mixing them with ground alabaster and a pinch of powdered silver. This isn't madness, this is fashion. The pearl powder serves a dual purpose that medieval beauty manuals praised extensively. First, the microscopic fragments create an almost supernatural luminescence on the skin, catching and reflecting candlelight in ways that make the wearer appear to glow from within. Second, pearls were believed to contain the essence of the moon itself, transferring lunar magic directly to the woman's complexion. You watch as Lady Eleanor applies this precious mixture with a brush made from actual angel feathers, or so the merchant claimed when he sold them for their weight in gold. But the real danger lies in the small vial she reaches for next. Belladonna, beautiful lady, the deadly nightshade that gives fashionable women their most prized feature, enormous dilated pupils that make them appear perpetually surprised and alluring. You witness her tilt her head back, steadying her hand as she allows exactly 3 drops of the toxic extract to fall into each eye. The immediate burning sensation makes her gasp softly, but she endures it with the stoicism of a warrior preparing for battle. The belladonna doesn't just dilate her pupils, it's slowly destroying her vision with each application. Medieval physicians understood this trade-off perfectly, noting in their treatises that beauty requires sacrifice of the practical for the divine. Women who used belladonna regularly often went completely blind by age 30, but they considered this a reasonable price for achieving the otherworldly appearance that marked them as truly noble. Historians still argue whether the belladonna beauty trend began as an attempt to mimic the dilated pupils of religious ecstasy, copying the expressions of saints in medieval paintings, or if it developed from observing how attractive women appeared when they were genuinely frightened or aroused. Either way, the practice spread through European nobility like wildfire, creating an entire generation of beautiful blind aristocrats. You notice how Lady Eleanor's hands shake slightly as the belladonna takes effect. This isn't just vanity, it's a complex social signal. Only the wealthiest women could afford to temporarily poison themselves daily, and only those with servants could function while essentially blinded by beauty treatments. Walking around with dilated pupils announced to the world that you are so rich you could afford to be functionally impaired for the sake of appearance. The pearl powder application requires nearly an hour of careful blending and smoothing. Medieval beauty manuals recommended specific brush strokes, always upward on the cheeks, circular motions on the forehead, and downward sweeps on the neck to encourage the humours to flow in harmony with natural beauty. Modern analysis of medieval remains shows that women who used pearl powder regularly had significantly higher levels of calcium deposits in their facial tissues, suggesting their skin was literally being mineralized by their beauty routine. As you watch this elaborate process, you can't help but wonder about the merchant networks that made such extravagance possible. Those pearls travelled from the Persian Gulf, carried by caravans across deserts and mountains, then loaded onto ships that crossed the Mediterranean during the most dangerous seasons. Pirates, storms, and political upheavals all threatened to interrupt the supply chain that kept medieval women luminescent. The most exclusive pearl powder wasn't just any pearls. It required virgin pearls that had never been worn by another woman. Merchants developed elaborate certification systems, complete with sworn statements from divers and dealers, guaranteeing that each pearl has been extracted from its oyster and delivered directly to the powder maker without ever touching female skin. The belief was that previously worn pearls carried the spiritual residue of their former owner, potentially transferring their flaws and misfortunes to the new user. Lady Eleanor finishes her pearl application just as the cathedral bells signal Vespers. Her face now glows with an ethereal shimmer that seems to emit its own light, while her enormous pupils make her gaze appear both innocent and mysteriously knowing. She's achieved the perfect medieval beauty standard, and sentenced herself to a future of blindness, possible heavy metal poisoning, and skin that will never again look natural without its expensive coating. Tomorrow she'll repeat this exact routine, grinding fresh pearls and applying fresh poison, because medieval beauty isn't a destination. It's a daily commitment to transforming yourself into something barely human. You move deeper into Lady Eleanor's morning ritual, where the real foundation of medieval beauty begins with the substance so common, yet so transformative, that it launched 1,000 beauty treatises, the humble egg. But this isn't your grandmother's Sunday breakfast. You're watching the creation of what medieval women called the Mask of Angels, a concoction so revered that convents kept special flocks of hens just for their beauty-making eggs. The process starts before dawn, when servants collect eggs that are still warm from the nest. Temperature matters crucially here. Medieval beauty manuals specify that eggs must be used within 2 hours of laying, while they still retain what alchemists called the life essence. You observe as Lady Eleanor's personal beauty assistant a woman named Margot who commands higher wages than most knights. Carefully separates dozens of egg whites into a silver bowl that's been chilled overnight in the castle's coldest chamber. The egg whites alone aren't enough. They must be transformed into something approaching magic. Margot begins whisking with a birch branch whisk, but not just any birch. This wood comes from a tree that was struck by lightning but survived, because medieval women believed that lightning-touched wood could transfer celestial power directly to their skin. The whisking continues for what feels like hours, creating peaks so stiff they could support the weight of a gold coin, a test that Margot actually performs to ensure proper consistency. Into this cloud of egg foam, she slowly incorporates ground alabaster powder, the same mineral used to create the most luminous church sculptures. The alabaster doesn't just provide colour, it creates a physical barrier that reflects light in very specific ways. Medieval optical texts explain that alabaster's crystalline structure bends light at angles that confuse the eye and create the illusion of youth. Modern spectroscopy confirms that alabaster particles do indeed scatter light in ways that minimize the appearance of fine lines and skin texture. But here's where medieval beauty science gets genuinely sophisticated. The mixture requires exactly 7 drops of rosewater blessed by a bishop on Easter morning. Not 6 drops, not 8, 7. Because medieval numerology declared 7 the number of feminine perfection. The rosewater itself represents months of preparation, as roses for beauty purposes must be gathered at dawn, on the feast day of St. Catherine, patron of unmarried women, then distilled through a process involving silver coils and prayers recited in Latin. You watch Lady Eleanor settle into her beauty chair, a throne-like piece of furniture with a tilting back that positions her face at the perfect angle for mask application. The egg white mixture goes on cold, so cold that you can see her breath in small puffs, as Margot applies it with brushes made from swan feathers. The sensation must be shocking, like having ice water painted across your entire face, but Lady Eleanor endures it with the practiced stillness of someone who's performed this ritual thousands of times. The mask isn't applied randomly. Medieval beauty maps dictated specific patterns based on astrological principles. Circular motions on the forehead to honour the sun, downward strokes on the cheeks to encourage earthward humility, and upward sweeps around the eyes to lift the spirit toward heaven. Margot follows these patterns with religious precision, because deviation from the prescribed method could theoretically invite spiritual contamination into the beauty process. As the egg whites begin to tighten and dry, Lady Eleanor's face transforms into something resembling a classical marble statue. The alabaster creates an almost supernatural paleness, while the tightening proteins literally reshape her facial contours. Medieval physicians understood that this temporary lifting effect made women appear younger, but they attributed it to the mask drawing youthful humours from the deeper flesh to the surface. Historians still argue whether the egg white beauty trend originated from observing how young women's skin appeared after working in monastery kitchens, where they were frequently splattered with raw egg during food preparation, or if it developed from attempts to recreate the luminous complexions depicted in religious artwork. Certainly, many medieval paintings show saints and angels with the exact porcelain-pale skin that egg-white masks produced. The waiting period requires complete stillness for exactly 1 hour, timed by burning a specific length of blessed candle. During this time, Lady Eleanor cannot speak, laugh, or even smile, as any facial movement could crack the mask and allegedly invite evil spirits to enter through the fissures. You observe her sitting motionless as a cathedral statue, while Margot reads aloud from beauty psalms, actual religious texts adapted to praise feminine loveliness as a reflection of divine creation. The mask removal process is almost ceremonial. Margot uses warm milk, not water, to soften the edges, because medieval theory held that milk possessed gentle dissolution properties that wouldn't shock the newly purified skin. The milk must come from cows that graze in monastery pastures, as secular cows apparently produce milk too contaminated by worldly concerns for beauty purposes. As the mask peels away, Lady Eleanor's skin appears dramatically transformed. The alabaster has left a subtle luminescent residue that will last for days, while the egg proteins have temporarily tightened every line and pore. Her complexion now matches the impossible standards depicted in illuminated manuscripts. Smooth, pale, and seemingly lit from within. But there's a darker side to this angelic transformation. Daily egg-white masks gradually thin the skin, making it increasingly fragile and dependent on the treatments. Women who used these masks regularly often developed a condition medieval physicians called shell skin. complexions so delicate that they bruised from gentle touches and tore easily in dry weather. The cost of maintaining this routine was astronomical. A single mask required between 12 and 20 fresh eggs, plus the precious alabaster and blessed rosewater. For a woman to maintain this beauty standard daily, her household needed to support a small army of specialized servants, suppliers, and even clergy willing to bless beauty ingredients for appropriate donations. The final step involves applying a light dusting of pearl powder over the egg-tightened skin, creating layers of luminescence that catch and reflect light like actual angelic radiance. Lady Eleanor now possesses the porcelain perfection that medieval society deemed the highest possible feminine achievement, and she'll need to recreate it again tomorrow and every day after, until her skin becomes too damaged to hold the treatments anymore. You follow Lady Eleanor from her facial chamber into what can only be described as a medieval alchemist's laboratory dedicated entirely to hair transformation. The air hangs thick with the scent of exotic herbs and spices worth more than entire villages, while copper cauldrons bubble over carefully maintained fires that have been burning continuously for months. Here, you're about to witness hair treatments so elaborate and expensive that they literally shaped international trade routes. The morning's hair ritual begins with what medieval beauty texts called the Golden Awakening, a process that starts with servants grinding fresh rosemary that was harvested under the full moon of the previous month. Not just any rosemary will suffice. These particular sprigs come from monastery gardens where they've been blessed daily by monks during morning prayers. The grinding releases oils so potent you can smell their piney essence from across the room, while Margot explains to Lady Eleanor that today's batch is particularly powerful because the rosemary was picked by virgin hands on the feast day of St. Agnes. Into the rosemary base goes fresh sage, but again, this isn't ordinary garden sage. These leaves come from plants that grow wild on cliff tops along the Mediterranean coast, where they're harvested by specialized gatherers who risk their lives climbing dangerous rock faces to collect herbs that supposedly absorb the essence of both earth and sea. The sage must be ground in a specific clockwise pattern while reciting beauty prayers, because medieval herbalists believed that the direction of grinding could actually reverse or enhance the plant's natural properties. But the real treasure of this morning's hair treatment lies in a small wooden box that Margot handles with almost religious reverence. Inside, carefully wrapped in silk blessed by the Pope himself, are delicate threads of saffron, the most expensive spice in the medieval world, worth literally more than gold by weight. These particular saffron strands represent the labour of hundreds of flowers, each one hand-picked at dawn during the brief autumn harvest, then dried using techniques guarded more carefully than military secrets. You watch as Margot counts out exactly 47 saffron threads, not 46, not 48, but precisely 47, because medieval numerology declared this the perfect number for feminine hair transformation. Each thread costs approximately what a skilled craftsman earns in a week, making this single hair treatment worth more than most people see in an entire lifetime. The saffron goes into a silver basin filled with heated wine. Not water, but wine blessed by bishops and aged in oak casks that have held only sacramental beverages. The brewing process requires constant attention and specific timing. Margot stirs the mixture with a golden spoon, in patterns that mirror the movement of celestial bodies, because medieval beauty theory insisted that hair treatments must harmonize with cosmic forces to achieve their full effectiveness. The mixture bubbles and steams, releasing an aroma so intoxicating that it makes you slightly dizzy. A combination of wine, herbs, and that distinctive honey-like scent of precious saffron. While the hair potion brews, Lady Eleanor's hair undergoes its own preparatory ritual. Her locks, which reach nearly to her waist, must be completely cleaned using soap made from olive oil and ash from fires that burned only apple wood. The cleaning process alone takes nearly 2 hours, with servants working in careful sections to ensure every strand receives equal attention. Medieval hair care manuals specified that noble hair should never be washed with the same soap used by servants, as the spiritual contamination could transfer through the cleansing process. The dried hair then receives its first herbal treatment, a conditioning paste made from beaten egg yolks mixed with honey that bees collected exclusively from flowers growing in monastery gardens. This conditioning step requires Lady Eleanor to sit perfectly still for exactly the time it takes to recite 50 Ave Marias, while servants massage the mixture through her hair with ivory combs carved from elephant tusks blessed by returning crusaders. Historians still argue whether the saffron hair treatment tradition began with attempts to recreate the golden halos depicted in religious artwork, or if it developed from observing how attractive certain women appeared when sunlight caught their naturally blonde hair. Either way, the practice created an entire international industry, with saffron merchants becoming some of the wealthiest individuals in medieval Europe. When the saffron mixture reaches the perfect temperature, tested by dropping a single pearl into the liquid and observing how quickly it sinks, the real transformation begins. Lady Eleanor leans back over the silver basin, while Margot slowly pours the precious liquid through her hair, section by careful section. The saffron doesn't just colour the hair, it transforms it into something that seems to generate its own golden light. The process must be repeated exactly 7 times, with fresh saffron mixture prepared for each application. Between treatments, Lady Eleanor's hair is wrapped in silk cloths and heated with warmed stones, allowing the expensive spices to penetrate deeply into each strand. The heat releases more aromatic compounds, creating a cloud of scented steam that perfumes her hair so intensely that people can identify her approach from 3 rooms away. The scientific reality behind saffron hair treatments is actually quite sophisticated. Saffron contains natural compounds that bond with hair proteins, creating semi-permanent colour changes that last for months. The spice also contains oils that genuinely condition and strengthen hair, while its natural antibacterial properties help maintain scalp health. Medieval women accidentally discovered one of the most effective natural hair care systems ever developed. But achieving these golden highlights came at an extraordinary personal cost. The single saffron hair treatment required approximately 6 months of a typical family's entire income. Women who maintained this beauty standard needed to budget larger amounts for hair care than most people spent on food, shelter, and clothing combined. The economic pressure to maintain saffron-highlighted hair literally drove some noble families into bankruptcy. The final step involves combing the treated hair with combs made from rare narwhal tusks, because medieval bestiaries claim that narwhal horn could detect and neutralize any remaining impurities in the hair treatment. As Lady Eleanor's golden locks cascade down her back, catching and reflecting every source of light in the room, you realize you're witnessing not just a beauty treatment, but a display of wealth so extreme it functions as a form of economic warfare against other noble families. Her hair now glows with the warmth of burnished gold, each strand seeming to contain captured sunlight that will continue radiating beauty for the next several months, assuming she can afford to repeat this ruinously expensive process when the colour begins to fade. You enter the most dangerous chamber of Lady Eleanor's beauty routine, where the air itself seems to shimmer with toxicity, and the very walls bear stains from years of handling substances that would horrify modern chemists. This is where medieval women performed their most deadly beauty ritual, the application of lead paint and arsenic powder to achieve the ghostly white complexion that marked the highest levels of nobility. You're about to witness cosmetic practices so lethal that they literally killed their users slowly, elegantly, but inevitably. The morning's poison application begins with what medieval beauty manuals euphemistically called Venetian ceruse, a mixture of white lead and vinegar that creates a paint-like substance capable of transforming any complexion into the stark white of fresh snow. You watch as Margot opens a sealed lead container with hands already stained grey from years of handling these materials, her own complexion bearing the telltale pallor of chronic lead exposure. The cerus itself looks innocuous enough, a smooth, creamy paste that gleams with an almost supernatural whiteness. But this isn't simply lead paint. The formula represents centuries of deadly experimentation, with each generation of court beauties adding their own refinements to the basic recipe. Today's mixture includes pulverized pearls for luminescence, ground alabaster for texture, and most dangerously, a precise amount of arsenic trioxide to create what medieval women called the divine glow. A subtle luminescence that made the wearer's skin appear lit from within. The arsenic comes from a source that would make modern authorities shut down entire regions. Mines in the mountains of Bohemia, where prisoners and slaves extract the deadly mineral under conditions that kill most workers within months. The refined arsenic powder arrives at castle beauty chambers wrapped in multiple layers of blessed silk, because medieval alchemists understood its lethal nature even if they couldn't fully comprehend the mechanisms of arsenic poisoning. Lady Eleanor settles into her beauty chair while Margot prepares the application tools, brushes made from the finest badger hair, each one worth more than a farmer's yearly earnings. The brushes themselves are weapons of slow destruction, as they gradually absorb lead and arsenic particles that will eventually poison anyone who handles them regularly. Medieval beauty assistants rarely lived past age 30, dying of mysterious wasting diseases that modern medicine would immediately recognize as heavy metal poisoning. The application process follows patterns established by Byzantine court painters because medieval beauty theorists understood that they were essentially painting portraits directly onto living flesh. Margot begins with Lady Eleanor's forehead, using smooth upward strokes that create a perfectly even coating of toxic white. The lead paint provides immediate coverage, transforming skin tone in ways that seem almost magical. Freckles disappear, age spots vanish, and natural skin texture becomes as smooth as marble. But the arsenic serves a different purpose entirely. As it penetrates the skin, it creates a subtle phosphorescent effect that makes the wearer appear to emit their own light. Medieval physicians noticed this phenomenon, but attributed it to the arsenic awakening the divine spark within feminine flesh. The modern science understands that arsenic poisoning causes a distinctive skin pallor combined with a slight luminescence from cellular damage. The medieval divine glow was actually the visible manifestation of systematic poisoning. The face painting requires nearly 3 hours, because each section must be allowed to dry completely before adjacent areas can be treated. Lady Eleanor sits motionless as Margot works, her eyes closed to prevent the toxic fumes from causing immediate damage to her vision. The lead and arsenic vapours create a slight haze in the room that makes everyone slightly dizzy, another effect that medieval beauty texts praised as the swoon of divine transformation. Historians still argue whether the lead white beauty standard originated from attempts to mimic the pale complexions of cloistered nuns who rarely saw sunlight, or if it developed from observing how attractive consumptive women appeared as tuberculosis drained the colour from their skin. Either interpretation is deeply disturbing, suggesting that medieval beauty standards were essentially fetishizing illness and death. The cheek treatment requires a different formulation entirely, lead paint mixed with ground mercury to create what alchemists called quicksilver roses. The mercury makes the mixture slightly more fluid, allowing it to blend seamlessly with the base layer while adding its own toxic contribution to the overall poisoning process. Margot applies this mixture in careful circles, creating the suggestion of natural colour beneath the stark white foundation. As the morning progresses, Lady Eleanor's transformation becomes increasingly dramatic and increasingly deadly. Her face now bears the perfect alabaster complexion that medieval artists used to depict angels and saints. But every moment she wears this beautifying mask, lead and arsenic are absorbing into her bloodstream, accumulating in her organs, and beginning the slow process that will eventually kill her. The economic cost of maintaining this deadly beauty standard was staggering. A single morning's application of lead, ceruse and arsenic powder cost more than most nobles spent on food in an entire month. The ingredients required international trade networks, specialized mining operations, and alchemical processing techniques that were closely guarded secrets. Families regularly bankrupted themselves, maintaining the toxic complexions that mark them as truly elite. But the personal cost was even higher. Women who used lead and arsenic cosmetics regularly showed signs of poisoning within months. Fatigue, digestive problems, and neurological symptoms that medieval physicians couldn't properly diagnose. Within a few years, users developed the distinctive symptoms of chronic heavy metal poisoning, hair loss, tooth loss, and organ failure that medieval medicine attributed to excessive beauty-drawing life force from the body. The most tragic aspect of these beauty practices was their addictive nature. As lead and arsenic damaged the skin, women required increasingly heavy applications to maintain their desired appearance. The poisons created a cycle, where each use made the natural skin more damaged and discoloured, requiring ever more toxic treatments to achieve the same beautifying effects. By the time Lady Eleanor's face painting is complete, she's absorbed enough toxins to begin the slow poisoning that will likely kill her within the next decade. Her reflection in the polished silver mirror shows the perfect medieval beauty, a face of supernatural whiteness that seems to glow with divine light. She's achieved exactly the appearance that medieval society deemed the pinnacle of feminine attractiveness, and she's paid for it with her life. Tomorrow she'll repeat this exact routine, adding more layers of poison to her system, while her body struggles to process toxins that accumulate faster than they can be eliminated. You step into what can only be described as a medieval medical torture chamber, disguised as a beauty salon, where the pursuit of rosy cheeks has taken a turn so extreme that it involves deliberately draining the life force from noble women through controlled bloodletting. The year is 1348, and you're about to witness beauty practices that make modern cosmetic procedures look like gentle spa treatments. Here, in Lady Eleanor's private bloodletting chamber, the quest for the perfect flush involves leeches, razor blades, and medical theories so bizarre they border on ritualized self-harm. The morning begins with Lady Eleanor's personal physician-beautician, Master Aldrich, examining her complexion in the cold morning light streaming through stained glass windows. He's looking for what medieval beauty manuals called excessive sanguine accumulation. Essentially, any sign that her blood contains too much vitality, which could make her cheeks appear too naturally healthy, and therefore insufficiently refined. The ideal medieval complexion required a delicate balance. Enough blood to create attractive colour, but not so much that the woman appeared robust like a common peasant. Master Aldrich opens an ornate wooden box containing his collection of medicinal leeches, each one carefully maintained on a diet of blessed water and wine. These aren't ordinary swamp leeches. They're specially bred specimens that have been fed exclusively on the blood of young virgins, because medieval medical theory insisted that leeches absorbed the spiritual qualities of their previous meals. The cost of maintaining such a collection rivals that of keeping exotic livestock, with each leech requiring individual care and feeding schedules more complex than those used for prize horses. The leech selection process follows astrological principles that would seem completely insane to modern medical practitioners. Today is Thursday, governed by Jupiter, which means the leeches applied to Lady Eleanor's face must be those born during Jovian planetary alignments. Master Aldrich examines each specimen carefully, looking for leeches that display the proper enthusiasm for their work. Sluggish leeches supposedly produce inadequate results, while overly aggressive ones might drain too much blood and create an unfashionably pale complexion. You watch as Lady Eleanor reclines on a specially designed chair that elevates her head to the perfect angle for facial bloodletting. The chair itself is a marvel of medieval engineering, with adjustable supports that position the patient to optimize blood flow patterns, while minimizing the risk of fainting during the procedure. Fainting during beauty bloodletting was considered deeply embarrassing, as it suggested the woman lacked the spiritual fortitude necessary for true nobility. The leech application follows a precise map of facial blood vessels that medieval physicians had developed through centuries of trial and error, plus a disturbing number of accidental deaths. Master Aldrich places the first leech just above Lady Eleanor's left cheekbone, where it immediately attaches and begins its work. The sight is simultaneously fascinating and horrifying. You can actually see the leech's body expanding as it fills with noble blood, while Lady Eleanor's skin develops the exact rosy flush that medieval beauty standards demanded. But leeches alone aren't sufficient for the most fashionable bloodletting treatments. Master Aldrich produces a set of razor-sharp lancets made from blessed steel, each one designed for specific types of beauty bloodletting procedures. The lancets must be blessed by priests because medieval medical theory held that unblessed blades could introduce evil spirits into the bloodstream along with the desired cosmetic effects. The controlled cutting requires extraordinary precision. Master Aldrich makes tiny incisions along Lady Eleanor's temples, each cut calculated to release exactly the right amount of blood to create attractive colouring without causing permanent scarring. The blood flows in thin red streams down her face, and rather than wiping it away immediately, Master Aldrich allows it to follow natural drainage patterns that supposedly enhance the final cosmetic effect. Historians still argue whether beauty bloodletting developed from observing how attractive women appeared immediately after experiencing emotional distress, which naturally brought blood to the surface of their faces, or if it evolved from religious flagellation practices that medieval society gradually sexualized and aestheticized. Either origin story suggests deeply disturbing cultural attitudes toward feminine beauty and suffering. The timing of blood removal requires constant monitoring. Too little bloodletting produces insufficient colour, while too much creates a pallor that takes weeks to recover from, assuming the patient survives at all. Master Aldrich uses an hourglass filled with sand blessed by cathedral bishops to ensure that each leech remains attached for exactly the proper duration, while the lancet wounds are allowed to bleed for precisely timed intervals. As the leeches work and the carefully controlled wounds continue bleeding, Lady Eleanor's complexion develops the exact rosy glow that medieval beauty treatises described as the flush of divine favour. Her cheeks now display the perfect balance of colour and pallor, suggesting health without the vulgar robustness of working-class women who achieved their complexions through actual physical activity rather than controlled medical bloodletting. The psychological effects of beauty bloodletting were as important as the physical ones. Women who underwent regular bloodletting treatments reported feeling lightheaded, ethereal, and spiritually elevated, sensations that medieval beauty culture interpreted as signs of successful transformation toward angelic perfection. Modern medicine recognizes these symptoms as classic signs of mild anemia and blood loss, but medieval women cultivated them as desirable beauty side effects. The most exclusive bloodletting treatments involved what Master Aldrich calls sympathetic bleeding, procedures where the patient's blood was allowed to drip onto blessed relics or holy objects, supposedly transferring spiritual power back into the woman's system while she achieved her desired complexion. The relics required for such treatments cost enormous sums, making sympathetic bleeding a beauty luxury available only to the wealthiest families. When the bloodletting session concludes, Lady Eleanor's face bears the perfect medieval beauty complexion. Porcelain pale with naturally rosy cheeks that appear to glow from within. But this beauty comes at a severe cost. Regular bloodletting gradually weakens the immune system, making users susceptible to diseases that their bodies would normally fight off easily. Medieval beauty bloodletting literally shortened women's lives in exchange for temporary cosmetic perfection. The final step involves applying a light coating of pearl powder over the freshly bloodletted skin, sealing in the rosy colour while adding the luminescent glow that marked the highest levels of beauty achievement. Lady Eleanor now possesses the exact complexion that medieval poets described in their most romantic verses, and she's systematically damaged her health to achieve it. Tomorrow's beauty routine will require fresh bloodletting, because the rosy flush fades quickly and must be renewed regularly to maintain the perfect balance of colour and pallor that defines medieval feminine perfection. You enter the most mysterious and exotic corner of Lady Eleanor's beauty chambers, where the air hangs thick with the smoke of burning almond shells, and the walls are stained with centuries of soot from sacred fires. This is where medieval women created the dramatic eye makeup that transformed them into otherworldly beings, using materials so rare and dangerous that acquiring them required international conspiracies, religious corruption, and trading relationships with civilizations that most Europeans believed were mythical. The morning's eye transformation begins with what medieval beauty texts called the charcoal of saints, ash created by burning almond shells that have been blessed during Easter Vigil services. But these aren't ordinary almonds, they must come from trees that grow in monastery orchards, harvested by monks who have taken vows of silence, and the shells must be burned using fires lit directly from the eternal flame that burns before the altar of St. Lucy, patron saint of eyes and vision. You watch as Margot tends a small brazier where almond shells crackle and pop, releasing aromatic smoke that makes your eyes water. The burning process requires constant attention and specific prayers, because medieval alchemists believed that improper burning could reverse the charcoal's beautifying properties, potentially causing blindness instead of enhancement. The shells must burn for exactly the time required to recite the entire Book of Psalms, while the fire is fed only with wood from fruit trees that have never borne imperfect fruit. While the sacred charcoal develops, Lady Eleanor's eye preparation begins with a substance so exotic it might as well be made from unicorn tears, genuine coal imported from the distant lands of Egypt and Nubia. The coal arrives wrapped in silk that has been blessed by Eastern Christian patriarchs, transported by caravan routes so dangerous that most merchants die attempting the journey. Each small container of coal represents months of travel through desert storms, bandit attacks, and political upheavals that could end civilizations. The coal isn't simply ground minerals, it's a complex mixture of antimony, galena, burnt almonds, and ingredients so secret that their recipes are passed down through family lines like state secrets. Medieval merchants who dealt in premium coal maintained private armies to protect their supplies and employed food tasters to ensure their products hadn't been poisoned by competitors. The markup on Egyptian coal was so enormous that successful coal merchants lived like princes, often marrying into noble families despite their common origins. But the most valuable component of Lady Eleanor's eye makeup comes from an even more exotic source: burned frankincense that was blessed by the Pope himself during Christmas Mass. This particular frankincense travelled from the mountains of Somalia, carried by merchants who risk their lives harvesting resin from trees that grow on cliff tops accessible only to the most skilled climbers. The burning of papal frankincense creates an ash so fine and so spiritually powerful that medieval beauty manuals claimed it could literally transform the wearer's soul through their eyes. The application process follows patterns that seem more like religious ritual than cosmetic procedure. Lady Eleanor closes her eyes while Margot begins drawing precise lines using a brush made from the whiskers of a lynx that was hunted during the full moon by a virgin archer. The brush itself cost more than most people earn in a lifetime, because lynx whiskers possess exactly the right combination of flexibility and precision required for the delicate work of medieval eye makeup. The charcoal application creates dramatic lines that extend far beyond the natural eye shape, following patterns derived from Byzantine religious art. Medieval women weren't trying to enhance their natural features. They were attempting to recreate the otherworldly eye makeup depicted on saints and angels in illuminated manuscripts. The goal was to look less human and more divine, with eyes so dramatically outlined that they appeared to be windows into the spiritual realm. Historians still argue whether the extreme eye makeup trend originated from attempts to mimic the coal-lined eyes of Eastern empresses that Crusaders encountered in Constantinople, or if it developed from religious ecstasy practices where women painted their eyes to resemble the visionary experiences described by mystic saints. Either way, the practice created trade relationships that connected medieval European castles to the most remote corners of the known world. The coal application requires extraordinary precision, because mistakes can't be easily corrected without ruining hours of previous beauty work. Margot uses the imported Egyptian coal to create thick, dark lines that make Lady Eleanor's eyes appear enormous and almost alien. The antimony in the coal provides intense black colour, while the galena adds a subtle metallic shimmer that catches and reflects candlelight in mesmerising ways. But there's a scientific sophistication to these exotic eye makeup formulations that medieval women discovered through centuries of experimentation. Antimony-based coal actually has antibacterial properties that help prevent eye infections, while the galena provides protection against the harsh light reflected off stone castle walls. Medieval women accidentally developed one of the most effective eye protection systems in human history, even as they were primarily focused on achieving supernatural beauty. The final layer involves the precious papal frankincense ash, applied so lightly it's almost invisible, but adds a subtle luminescence that makes the wearer's eyes appear to glow from within. This ash is applied using a brush so fine it's made from individual strands of silk thread, because even the slightest heavy-handedness could ruin the delicate effect that transforms ordinary eyes into something approaching the divine. As the morning's eye makeup reaches completion, Lady Eleanor's transformation becomes truly startling. Her eyes now dominate her face, outlined in dramatic black lines that extend toward her temples and enhanced with metallic shimmer that makes her gaze appear both hypnotic and otherworldly. The exotic materials have created an effect that seems to transcend normal human beauty, making her appear like a figure stepped out of religious artwork. The cost of maintaining this eye makeup routine was astronomical even by medieval noble standards. A single morning's application consumed materials worth more than a knight's warhorse, while the international supply chains required to maintain consistent access to Egyptian coal and papal frankincense could be disrupted by wars, political changes, or simple bad weather that affected caravan routes. But perhaps most remarkably, the eye makeup serves as a form of international diplomacy encoded in cosmetics. Lady Eleanor's face now bears materials from Egypt, Somalia, Byzantium and Rome, making her a walking advertisement for the complex trading relationships that connected medieval Europe to the rest of the known world. Her beauty routine literally depends on maintaining peaceful relationships with civilizations that most of her contemporaries consider exotic and possibly mythical. Tomorrow, she'll repeat this elaborate process, burning fresh sacred charcoal and applying fresh exotic coal, because these dramatic eyes fade quickly and must be renewed daily to maintain their supernatural effect. You enter what resembles a medieval torture chamber, designed specifically for cranial modification, where the pursuit of the perfect forehead has created beauty practices so extreme they literally reshape human skulls. The air rings with the soft scraping sounds of tweezers against skin and the occasional sharp intake of breath as Lady Eleanor endures what can only be described as systematic facial mutilation disguised as fashionable grooming. Here, in the most painful corner of medieval beauty culture, women transform themselves into alien-like creatures with foreheads so unnaturally high they appear to belong to a different species entirely. The morning's forehead reconstruction begins with Lady Eleanor examining her hairline in a polished silver mirror that cost more than most families' yearly income. She's looking for any sign that hair has begun growing back in areas that were plucked months ago, because the ideal medieval forehead requires constant vigilance to maintain. The beauty standard demands a hairline that starts approximately 4 inches higher than nature intended, creating a dome-like expanse of pale skin that medieval poets compared to the smooth perfection of cathedral marble. You watch as Margot produces an array of tweezers so specialised they require individual names and specific uses. The Virgin's Touch tweezers, made from blessed silver, are reserved for the initial hairline reshaping. The Angel's Precision tools, crafted from narwhal horn, handle the delicate work around the temples. The most feared implement, known simply as the Confessor, is reserved for removing the most stubborn hairs that resist other methods. These tweezers are made from iron that was forged using coals from the fires that burned heretics, because medieval beauty theory held that such metal possessed the spiritual authority to remove hair that defied proper Christian beauty standards. The plucking process follows a mathematical pattern based on medieval theories of facial proportion that would make Renaissance artists weep with envy. Lady Eleanor's natural hairline must be moved back exactly 3 1/2 inches from her eyebrows, creating what beauty manuals called the divine ratio of forehead to face. This measurement isn't arbitrary, it's based on careful analysis of religious artwork depicting the Virgin Mary, whose impossibly high forehead became the template for medieval feminine beauty. But achieving this alien-like forehead requires more than simple hair removal. Lady Eleanor must also eliminate her eyebrows entirely, plucking every single hair until her brow ridge appears as smooth and hairless as a newborn's. Medieval beauty theory held that eyebrows were vulgar reminders of humanity's animal nature, and truly refined women should appear as ethereal and hairless as angels. The eyebrow removal process is excruciating, requiring hours of meticulous plucking, while Lady Eleanor grips the arms of her beauty chair to avoid crying out. The pain of forehead plucking created its own cultural rituals around endurance and feminine virtue. Women who could undergo extensive hair removal without showing distress were praised for their spiritual strength, while those who cried or flinched were considered weak and possibly unworthy of true beauty. Medieval beauty culture essentially turned self-torture into a test of moral character, with the most attractive women being those who could suffer most gracefully. Historians still argue whether the high forehead beauty standard originated from attempts to mimic the elongated skulls depicted in Byzantine religious art, or if it developed from observing how attractive certain women appeared when their hair was pulled back for religious ceremonies. Either way, the practice created a beauty standard so extreme that it required permanent physical modification to achieve and maintain. The plucking session continues for nearly 4 hours, with Margot working systematically across Lady Eleanor's scalp while using a magnifying crystal made from blessed quartz to ensure that no hair escapes notice. Each individual hair must be grasped firmly and pulled out in a single swift motion, because partial removal could damage the follicle and cause the hair to grow back thicker and more difficult to remove in future sessions. As the morning progresses, Lady Eleanor's forehead expands dramatically, transforming her face into something that appears almost alien by modern standards. Her eyes, now positioned much lower on her face due to the expanded forehead, appear larger and more prominent. The effect is genuinely startling. She's beginning to resemble the otherworldly figures depicted in medieval religious manuscripts, with features so distorted from natural human proportions that she appears to belong to a different species. The most extreme practitioners of forehead modification went even further than simple hair removal. Some women used caustic chemicals made from lime and ash to permanently destroy hair follicles, ensuring that unwanted hair could never grow back. Others employed heated metal tools to burn away hair roots, accepting permanent scarring as a reasonable price for achieving the perfect dome-like forehead that marked the highest levels of medieval beauty. The economic implications of maintaining such extreme beauty standards were staggering. Lady Eleanor's forehead modification requires daily maintenance sessions that consume hours of her time and the full attention of skilled servants. The specialized tools alone represent a small fortune, while the time investment means that maintaining medieval beauty standards became essentially a full-time occupation for noble women. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of medieval forehead modification was its effect on women's social mobility and identity. Once a woman committed to this beauty standard, she became entirely dependent on maintaining it. The dramatic hair removal created such unnatural proportions that allowing the hair to grow back would result in an appearance that medieval society considered grotesquely deformed. Women who began forehead plucking were essentially trapped in a cycle of daily self-mutilation to avoid appearing monstrous by their culture's standards. The final step of the forehead treatment involves applying a light coating of pearl powder to the newly exposed skin, creating the luminescent dome that medieval beauty manuals described as the crown of feminine perfection. Lady Eleanor's forehead now appears to glow with supernatural light, a smooth expanse of pale skin that extends impossibly high above her eyes. As you observe the completed transformation, you realize that Lady Eleanor no longer looks entirely human. Her alien-like proportions and hairless features make her appear like a figure from religious artwork come to life, which is exactly what medieval beauty culture intended. she's achieved the perfect medieval feminine appearance by systematically removing the physical characteristics that mark her as belonging to the natural world. Tomorrow, she'll repeat this painful process, plucking any new hairs that have begun growing and maintaining the unnatural proportions that mark her as a woman, wealthy enough to transform herself into something approaching the divine through daily self-torture. You descend into the deepest chambers of Lady Eleanor's castle, where the air itself seems thick with luxury, and the very stones glisten with moisture from elaborate bathing rituals that transform simple washing into something approaching religious ceremony. Here, in bathing chambers that rival Roman thermae in their complexity, you're about to witness cleansing practices so extravagant they require the labour of entire villages and ingredients so precious that wars have been fought over their control. This is where medieval women attempted to recreate the legendary beauty baths of antiquity, turning hygiene into a performance of impossible wealth. The morning's bathing ritual begins with servants filling an enormous copper tub that was crafted by the finest metalworkers in Europe and blessed by bishops who charged more for their services than most people earned in a decade. The tub itself is a marvel of medieval engineering, with pipes that channel heated water from kitchen fires 3 floors below, and drainage systems that carry used bath water to gardens, where it nourishes herbs destined for future beauty treatments. But water alone could never satisfy medieval bathing standards. Lady Eleanor's bath requires ingredients so exotic they might as well be mythical. The first component of this legendary bath is honey. Not ordinary honey, but liquid gold harvested from beehives maintained in monastery orchards, where the bees feed exclusively on flowers that bloom within sight of holy relics. This particular honey comes from the Abbey of Cluny, where monks have spent generations perfecting beekeeping techniques that produce honey so pure and sweet it's considered sacramental. Each jar costs more than a knight's annual salary, and Lady Eleanor's bath requires 12 full jars to achieve the proper concentration. You watch as servants slowly pour the precious honey into the heated water, creating swirling golden streams that make the bath appear to be filled with liquid sunshine. The honey doesn't just dissolve, it transforms the water's very properties, making it feel silky and almost alive against the skin. Medieval bathing manuals claim that honey baths could literally transfer the industrious virtues of bees to the bather, while modern science confirms that honey's natural enzymes and antibacterial properties create genuine skin benefits. But honey alone cannot create the legendary bathing experience that Lady Eleanor seeks to recreate. The next ingredient represents perhaps the most extravagant beauty practice in human history. Mare's milk from horses that have been fed exclusively on blessed oats and spring water that has been sanctified by cathedral priests. The horses themselves live better than most human nobles, housed in stables that are cleaned daily and fed diets that cost more than feeding entire peasant families. The mare's milk arrives in silver containers that have been blessed by the same bishops who consecrate communion wine, because medieval beauty theory held that milk used for bathing must be as spiritually pure as milk used for feeding holy infants. Each container holds barely a gallon of milk, yet represents the full daily output of specially maintained horses whose care requires teams of servants and veterinarians skilled in maintaining animals that produce luxury cosmetic ingredients. As the milk pours into the honey-scented bath, the water becomes cloudy with an opalescent shimmer that makes it appear almost magical. The combination of honey and milk creates a bathing medium so rich and nourishing that medieval beauty texts claimed it could reverse aging, heal scars, and grant the bather skin so perfect it would rival that of classical goddesses. Modern dermatology confirms that milk baths do provide genuine skin benefits, as the lactic acid acts as a natural exfoliant while the proteins nourish and soften skin. But Lady Eleanor's bath requires one final ingredient that pushes extravagance into the realm of complete insanity. Actual donkey milk imported from the distant lands of North Africa, where the descendants of Cleopatra's own beauty donkeys supposedly still graze in desert oases. The donkey milk arrives after a journey so dangerous that most shipments never reach their destination, carried by merchants who risk their lives crossing bandits, infested trade routes for the enormous profits that exotic beauty ingredients provide. Historians still argue whether the donkey milk bathing tradition represents a genuine attempt to recreate Cleopatra's legendary beauty practices, or if it developed from medieval misunderstandings of classical texts that describe the Egyptian queen's bathing habits. Either way, the practice created international trade networks dedicated entirely to transporting luxury bathing ingredients across vast distances and through multiple political boundaries. The preparation of Lady Eleanor's bath requires nearly 6 hours, and the coordinated efforts of dozens of servants. The water temperature must be maintained at precisely the warmth of fresh spring rain, tested using a thermometer made from blessed mercury sealed in crystal tubes blessed by papal jewellers. The ingredients must be added in specific sequences while prayers are recited in Latin, because medieval bathing theory insisted that improper mixing could reverse the beautifying properties and potentially curse the bather with ugliness. As Lady Eleanor finally enters her extraordinary bath, the water transforms her skin almost immediately. The combination of honey, mare's milk, and exotic donkey milk creates a bathing medium so rich it's more like liquid silk than water. Her skin emerges from this bath looking porcelain perfect, with a luminescence that seems to glow from within, and a softness that medieval poets compared to the petals of roses grown in paradise. The bathing process itself follows ritualized patterns that mirror religious ceremonies. Lady Eleanor must remain in the bath for exactly the time required to recite specific beauty prayers, while servants massage her skin with cloths woven from silk that has been blessed by Eastern Orthodox patriarchs. The massage patterns follow astrological principles, with circular motions during lunar phases and linear strokes during solar periods. The cost of maintaining this bathing routine was so astronomical that it literally shaped medieval economics. The demand for luxury bathing ingredients created entire industries dedicated to producing and transporting materials that existed solely for cosmetic purposes. Honey merchants, specialized dairy farmers, and exotic animal traders became some of the wealthiest individuals in medieval Europe, often accumulating fortunes that rivaled those of landed nobility. When Lady Eleanor finally emerges from her legendary bath, her skin appears transformed into something approaching the divine. The combination of precious ingredients has created a complexion so perfect it seems to emit its own light, while her skin feels as soft as the finest silk and carries the subtle fragrance of honey and exotic flowers that will linger for days. The bath water itself, now enriched with the oils and essence of Lady Eleanor's skin, doesn't simply drain away. Medieval recycling practices dictated that this precious liquid should be collected and used to water the castle's herb gardens, where it will nourish the plants that will eventually become ingredients in future beauty treatments, creating a closed loop of luxury that transforms waste into wealth. Tomorrow, this entire elaborate ritual will be repeated with fresh ingredients, because medieval beauty standards demanded that such extraordinary bathing experiences become daily practices rather than occasional luxuries. You enter what can only be described as a medieval poison laboratory masquerading as a beauty salon, where the pursuit of youthful skin has led women to apply substances so toxic they would make modern chemists flee in terror. The air hangs heavy with the scent of crushed herbs that could kill with a single wrong measurement, while shelves lined with ceramic jars contain plant extracts so dangerous that their very names have been forgotten by history to prevent accidental poisonings. Here, in the most lethal corner of medieval beauty culture, you're about to witness face mask treatments that literally gamble with death in exchange for the promise of eternal youth. The morning's toxic beauty ritual begins with Lady Eleanor's personal herbalist poisoner, Master Geoffroy, who maintains what may be the most dangerous garden in all of Europe. His specialty lies in cultivating plants so deadly that even touching them with bare skin can cause severe poisoning. Yet when properly prepared, these same plants supposedly possess miraculous anti-aging properties. You watch as he carefully selects ingredients for today's face mask, using tools made from blessed silver, because ordinary metal supposedly becomes contaminated by the spiritual malevolence of poisonous plants. The first component comes from a plant so dangerous that medieval herbalists refused to write down its true name, referring to it only as the mercury of the earth. What modern botanists would recognize as a particularly lethal variety of mercury-containing herb that absorbs the toxic metal from soil where cinnabar deposits lie buried. The plant itself appears deceptively beautiful, with delicate silver-green leaves that shimmer in the candlelight and seem to emit their own ethereal glow. This luminescence isn't magical. It's the visible manifestation of mercury poisoning affecting the plant's cellular structure. Master Geoffroy harvests the mercury herb using tongs made from metal that was forged during a solar eclipse, because medieval alchemical theory insisted that such tools could handle toxic materials without becoming permanently contaminated. Each leaf must be selected while reciting prayers for protection from poisoning, and the harvested material can only be stored in containers lined with blessed wax to prevent the mercury from leaching into the storage vessels and poisoning future users. But the mercury herb alone cannot create the complete anti-aging mask that Lady Eleanor seeks. The second ingredient represents perhaps the most dangerous beauty practice in human history. Ground leaves from the deadly nightshade family, specifically a variety that medieval texts called devil's cherry for its beautiful but lethal fruit. This particular nightshade contains compounds so toxic that a dose the size of a pinhead can cause permanent blindness, while slightly larger amounts result in death preceded by hallucinations and convulsions. The nightshade preparation requires extraordinary precision, as the difference between a beautifying dose and a lethal one can be measured in individual grains of powder. Master Geoffroy uses scales so sensitive they can detect the weight of a single hair, weighing out exactly 7 grains of ground nightshade, while reciting prayers that supposedly protect both preparer and user from the plant's deadly properties. Medieval beauty manuals warned that even slight miscalculations could result in the eternal sleep of beauty, a euphemistic description of poisoning death. You observe as these incredibly dangerous ingredients are mixed with what appears to be a relatively innocent base of honey and rose water. But even these seemingly safe components have been treated with toxic substances. The honey comes from bees that have fed on flowers growing in soil contaminated with naturally occurring arsenic, creating honey that contains trace amounts of the poison that supposedly enhance its anti-aging properties. The rose water has been distilled using apparatus made from lead-lined copper, ensuring that the final product contains enough heavy metals to contribute to the mask's beautifying toxicity. Historians still argue whether the poison face mask tradition originated from observing how attractive certain women appeared during the early stages of chronic poisoning, when toxins create a distinctive pale luminescence, or if it developed from misunderstanding ancient texts that describe the use of toxic minerals in Egyptian beauty practices. Either way, the practice created a beauty culture that literally worshipped death as the ultimate source of feminine attractiveness. The application process follows protocols that seem more appropriate for handling weapons-grade toxins than cosmetic treatments. Lady Eleanor lies perfectly still while Master Geoffrey applies the poisonous mixture using brushes made from the tail feathers of ravens, because medieval theory held that ravens possessed natural immunity to poisons, and could therefore handle toxic substances safely. The mask must be applied in complete silence, as speaking supposedly disrupts the toxic compounds, and could cause them to become either ineffective or immediately lethal. The mask creates an immediate burning sensation that makes Lady Eleanor's eyes water, but medieval beauty culture interpreted this pain as evidence that the treatment was successfully burning away the accumulated years from her face. Modern toxicology understands that this burning sensation represents the beginning stages of chemical poisoning, as mercury and nightshade compounds begin destroying skin cells and penetrating into the bloodstream. As the toxic mask dries, Lady Eleanor's face develops an otherworldly pallor combined with a subtle luminescence that medieval beauty texts praised as the glow of approaching immortality. This effect results from cellular damage caused by the poisonous compounds, which create visible changes in skin transparency and light reflection. Medieval women cultivated this poisoned appearance as the height of beauty, not understanding that they were literally watching their faces being destroyed by toxic chemicals. The most dangerous aspect of poison face mask treatments was their cumulative effect. Each application added more mercury, nightshade, and arsenic to the user's system, gradually building up concentrations that eventually reached lethal levels. Women who used these masks regularly often died suddenly and mysteriously, with symptoms that medieval physicians couldn't properly diagnose, but attributed to excessive beauty-drawing life force from the body. The mask removal process requires equal care to its application, as the toxic residue must be carefully washed away using milk that has been blessed by priests and heated using fires made only from wood that has never been struck by lightning. Any residual poison left on the skin continues its destructive work, gradually accumulating in concentration until it reaches levels that cause permanent damage or death. When the treatment concludes, Lady Eleanor's skin appears dramatically transformed. The poison mask has created a complexion so pale and luminous it seems supernatural, while temporarily tightening the skin in ways that minimize fine lines and create an almost marble-like smoothness. She's achieved exactly the anti-aging effect that medieval beauty culture promised, by systematically poisoning herself with substances that will likely kill her within a few years. The economic cost of maintaining poison face mask treatments rivaled that of maintaining private armies. The rare toxic plants required specialized cultivation techniques, while the preparation process demanded the services of herbalist poisoners whose knowledge was so dangerous they commanded enormous fees. Many noble families bankrupted themselves purchasing the exotic poisons that their women required to maintain fashionable complexions. Tomorrow, Lady Eleanor will repeat this deadly ritual, adding fresh toxins to her already poisoned system, while pursuing a beauty ideal that literally equates attractiveness with approaching death. She's trapped in a cycle where each treatment makes her more dependent on the next, as the poisons gradually destroy her natural complexion and force her to rely increasingly on toxic cosmetics to maintain any appearance of beauty at all. You enter what can only be described as a medieval dental nightmare factory, where the pursuit of pearl-white teeth has created oral hygiene practices so horrifying they make modern root canals look like gentle spa treatments. The air carries the acrid stench of burning chemicals and the metallic tang of blood, while shelves lined with bottles contain substances so corrosive they could dissolve metal, and frequently dissolve teeth, gums and jawbones in the process. Here, in the most destructive corner of medieval beauty culture, you're about to witness dental care that literally eats faces from the inside out in pursuit of fashionably white smiles. The morning's dental destruction begins with Lady Eleanor examining her teeth in a polished silver mirror, while her personal dental beautician, Master Aldwin, prepares what medieval beauty manuals euphemistically called whitening elixirs, but what modern chemistry would recognize as concentrated acids capable of dissolving human tissue. The goal isn't simply clean teeth. Medieval dental beauty standards demanded teeth so white they appeared almost translucent, with a luminescence that suggested supernatural purity. You watch in horror as Master Aldwin produces the first component of today's teeth whitening regimen: human urine that has been aged in sealed containers for exactly 40 days, while being blessed daily by priests who specialize in bodily purification prayers. The urine isn't random. It comes specifically from young virgin women who have consumed diets consisting entirely of blessed bread and holy water for the duration of the aging process. Medieval dental theory held that such purified urine possessed the spiritual authority to cleanse teeth of both physical stains and moral contamination. The aged urine has developed a concentration of ammonia so powerful it makes your eyes water from across the room, while the religious purification process supposedly transforms it from waste product into sacred cleaning agent. Master Aldwin handles this liquid using tools made from blessed gold, because ordinary metals become corrupted by contact with even purified human waste. The urine rinse requires Lady Eleanor to swish the liquid in her mouth for exactly the time needed to recite 3 Hail Marys, while Master Aldwin monitors her breathing to ensure she doesn't accidentally swallow any of the toxic mixture. But urine alone cannot achieve the supernatural whiteness that medieval dental beauty demanded. The second component of today's treatment involves what Master Aldwin calls Roman sand, pumice that has been ground to powder so fine it resembles flour, then blessed by priests and mixed with crushed pearls to enhance its abrasive properties. This pumice doesn't come from just any volcanic source. It must be harvested from Mount Vesuvius itself, collected by monks who risk their lives climbing the active volcano to gather stone that supposedly contains the purifying fire of divine judgment. The pumice powder application requires rubbing the abrasive mixture directly onto teeth, using cloths made from silk that has been soaked in holy water, and dried using fires lit from altar candles. Master Aldwin demonstrates the proper technique, showing how to scrub each tooth individually while applying enough pressure to remove stains, but theoretically not enough to completely destroy the tooth enamel. The margin for error is virtually non-existent. Too little pressure produces inadequate results, while too much pressure literally grinds teeth down to stumps. You watch Lady Eleanor endure this oral sandblasting with the stoic expression of someone who has learned to accept extraordinary pain as the price of beauty. The pumice scrubbing creates a grinding sound that makes you cringe, while particles of ground pearl mix with blood from her damaged gums to create a paste that looks like liquid jewellery. Medieval dental beauty culture interpreted bleeding gums as evidence that the treatment was successfully awakening the life force within the teeth, not understanding that they were witnessing systematic tissue destruction. Historians still argue whether the extreme teeth whitening practices originated from attempts to mimic the pearl-white teeth depicted on saints in religious artwork, or if they developed from observing how attractive certain consumptive patients appeared when tuberculosis gave their teeth an unnaturally white appearance before killing them. Either interpretation suggests that medieval beauty standards were essentially fetishizing disease and death. The most dangerous component of medieval dental whitening involves what Master Aldwin refers to only as the philosopher's water, a mixture of acids so corrosive that it must be stored in specially blessed containers lined with gold to prevent it from eating through ordinary vessels. This liquid appears clear and harmless, but contains concentrated nitric acid that can dissolve human tissue on contact. Medieval alchemists discovered this acid while attempting to create the elixir of immortality, then realized it could also dissolve tooth stains, along with teeth, gums, and occasionally entire jawbones. The acid application requires extraordinary precision, as even tiny drops of the substance on gums or tongue can cause permanent damage. Master Aldwin uses brushes made from individual strands of blessed silver wire to apply microscopic amounts of the acid directly to tooth surfaces, while Lady Eleanor holds her mouth open in a position that prevents the liquid from contacting her soft tissues. The acid works immediately, dissolving stains and surface enamel with a subtle fizzing sound that indicates human tissue being chemically destroyed. As the acid treatment progresses, Lady Eleanor's teeth develop the exact supernatural whiteness that medieval beauty standards demanded, a luminescence so intense it appears almost blue-white in candlelight. But this perfection comes at a terrible cost. The repeated acid treatments gradually dissolve tooth enamel entirely, leaving the underlying dentin exposed and creating teeth so sensitive that eating or drinking becomes agony. Many women who maintain these whitening routines eventually couldn't consume anything except soft porridge and warm milk. The final step involves rinsing with wine that has been blessed during Easter Mass and mixed with ground pearls to seal the divine whiteness into the teeth. The alcohol provides temporary pain relief, while the pearl particles supposedly create a protective coating over the acid-damaged tooth surfaces. Medieval dental theory claimed this combination could make whitened teeth permanently resistant to future staining. Though modern science understands that nothing could protect teeth from the ongoing damage caused by regular acid treatments, the economic implications of maintaining such extreme dental beauty standards were staggering. A single teeth whitening session consumed materials worth more than most families spent on food in an entire year, while the specialized acids and blessed components required international trade networks and religious corruption to obtain. The human cost was even higher. Women who pursued perfect teeth whitening often lost their teeth entirely within a few years, requiring them to rely on painful dental prosthetics made from carved bone or metal. When the treatment concludes, Lady Eleanor's smile appears genuinely supernatural. Her teeth now glow with a whiteness so intense it seems to emit its own light. She's achieved exactly the dental perfection that medieval poets described in their most romantic verses, teeth so pure and luminous they rival freshly fallen snow or polished pearls. But this beauty is entirely temporary and ultimately destructive, as each whitening session brings her closer to complete dental destruction. The most tragic aspect of medieval dental whitening was its addictive nature. As the treatments gradually destroyed natural tooth enamel, women required increasingly powerful acids to maintain their desired appearance. The pursuit of perfect teeth became a spiral of escalating chemical destruction that typically ended with complete tooth loss, jawbone damage, and sometimes death from systemic poisoning caused by regularly ingesting corrosive substances. Tomorrow, Lady Eleanor will repeat this dental destruction ritual, applying fresh acids to teeth that become more damaged and sensitive with each treatment, pursuing a beauty standard that will ultimately leave her toothless, and disfigured before her 30th birthday. You step into what resembles a medieval paint shop dedicated entirely to human lip modification, where the pursuit of fashionably red mouths has created cosmetic practices so toxic they regularly kill their users through systematic mercury poisoning. The air shimmers with metallic particles that catch the candlelight like deadly glitter, while workbenches covered in grinding apparatus process materials so dangerous that their preparation requires the same safety protocols used for creating weapons-grade poisons. Here, in the most lethal corner of the medieval cosmetic culture, you're about to witness lip beautification that literally paints women to death with colours so intense they seem to glow with their own malevolent light. The morning's lip transformation begins with Lady Eleanor's personal colour master, Brother Franciscus, who maintains what may be Europe's most dangerous collection of pigment-making materials. His specialty lies in creating red cosmetics so vibrant they appear almost supernatural, achieved through the use of substances so toxic that medieval guild regulations required him to confess his sins weekly, in case his work accidentally kills him before he can receive last rites. You watch as he prepares today's lip colouring using materials that would make modern hazmat teams evacuate entire buildings. The first component of this deadly beauty ritual involves creatures so small you can barely see them, yet so valuable they're traded like precious gems across international markets. These are cochineal beetles, harvested from cactus plants in distant Mexican territories that most Europeans believe are mythical lands inhabited by monsters and demons. Each tiny beetle must be collected by hand during specific lunar phases, then dried using fires made only from wood blessed by Aztec priests. A requirement that creates supply chains involving religious cooperation between civilizations that are theoretically at war with each other. You observe Brother Franciscus carefully counting out exactly 99 dried beetles, not 100, because medieval numerology declared that number cursed for beauty purposes, and not 98, because insufficient beetles produce colours too pale for fashionable lips. Each beetle represents weeks of dangerous travel through territories controlled by hostile indigenous populations, then months of careful preservation and transportation across oceans where storms and pirates threaten to destroy entire shipments of precious insects. The beetle crushing process follows ritualized patterns that seem more appropriate for religious ceremonies than cosmetic preparation. Brother Franciscus uses a mortar made from stone quarried from the same mountains where Jesus supposedly prayed, because medieval colour theory insisted that sacred materials could enhance the spiritual properties of pigments. The crushing must be performed while reciting specific prayers for protection from the evil influences that supposedly inhabit all red colourings, as medieval Christianity associated red pigments with demonic powers that could corrupt the souls of their users. As the beetles transform into crimson powder, their true value becomes apparent. This tiny pile of crushed insects represents approximately 2 years' wages for a skilled craftsman, making Lady Eleanor's lips more expensive per square inch than most people's entire wardrobes. But cochineal alone cannot create the perfect medieval lip colour. Achieving fashionable redness requires additional ingredients so toxic they transform cosmetics into weapons of slow-motion suicide. The next component comes from mines, so dangerous that they're worked exclusively by condemned criminals who are expected to die within months of beginning their labour. Cinnabar, the primary source of mercury-based pigments, produces the most intensely red colours known to medieval chemistry, while simultaneously poisoning everyone who handles it. The cinnabar arrives at castle beauty chambers wrapped in blessed cloths and sealed in containers lined with gold, because ordinary materials become contaminated by the mineral's toxic emanations. Brother Franciscus grinds the cinnabar using tools made from blessed silver, while wearing gloves fashioned from leather blessed by bishops. Though these precautions provide virtually no protection against mercury vapor poisoning. The grinding process releases clouds of toxic particles that make everyone in the room slightly dizzy and nauseous, effects that medieval cosmetic theory interpreted as evidence that the pigment was successfully awakening divine beauty powers. But the most dangerous component of medieval lip colouring comes from what Brother Franciscus calls the blood of philosophers, lead-based vermilion that creates colours so intense they seem to pulse with their own internal light. This particular lead compound requires processing techniques so complex they're closely guarded trade secrets, involving heating lead and sulfur compounds to temperatures that produce toxic fumes, capable of killing anyone who inhales them without proper protection that medieval technology couldn't provide. The vermilion preparation takes place in a specially designed chamber with chimneys that channel the toxic fumes away from the workers, though enough poison remains in the air to cause chronic health problems for everyone involved in the process. Medieval vermilion makers rarely lived past age 40, dying of symptoms that modern medicine would immediately recognize as severe heavy metal poisoning, but that medieval physicians attributed to excessive exposure to the spiritual essence of perfect redness. Thus, historians still argue whether the extreme lip colouring tradition originated from attempts to recreate the blood-red lips depicted on martyred saints in religious artwork, or if it developed from observing how attractive certain women appeared during the early stages of mercury poisoning, when toxins create a distinctive flush in facial tissues. Either interpretation suggests that medieval beauty culture was essentially worshipping death and disease as the ultimate sources of feminine attractiveness. The final pigment mixture combines crushed beetles, ground cinnabar, and lead vermilion in proportions so precise they must be measured using scales sensitive enough to detect individual grains of sand. Too much cochineal produces colours too purple, while excess cinnabar creates orange tints that medieval fashion considered vulgar. The perfect balance requires exactly 7 parts beetle powder, 3 parts cinnabar, and 1 part lead vermilion, a combination that creates the most beautiful and most lethal lip cosmetic in human history. The application process transforms Lady Eleanor's lips into something that appears almost supernatural. Brother Franciscus uses brushes made from the finest sable hair to paint the toxic mixture onto her mouth, creating coverage so intense and uniform it seems like her lips have been carved from precious red stone. The colours are so vivid they appear to glow in candlelight, while the metallic components create subtle shifts in hue that make her lips seem to change colour as she moves. But this extraordinary beauty comes at a price that makes previous medieval cosmetic dangers seem mild by comparison. The combination of mercury, lead, and other toxic compounds creates a lip cosmetic so poisonous that regular use guarantees systematic heavy metal poisoning. Women who maintained fashionable red lips typically began showing symptoms of toxicity within months: hair loss, tooth loss, and neurological problems that medieval medicine couldn't properly diagnose. The most tragic aspect of toxic lip colouring was its immediate appeal combined with its delayed consequences. The pigments created such stunning beauty effects that women became psychologically addicted to the transformation, continuing to use the deadly cosmetics even as their health deteriorated. The colours were so intense and long-lasting that users felt ordinary and unattractive without them, creating dependency cycles that typically ended in disfigurement or death. When Brother Franciscus completes Lady Eleanor's lip transformation, her mouth appears to be carved from living rubies, with colours so intense they seem to pulse with their own internal fire. she's achieved the perfect medieval lip beauty standard and begun the systematic poisoning process that will likely kill her within the next few years. Tomorrow, she'll repeat this deadly ritual, adding fresh toxins to lips already saturated with mercury and lead, because medieval lip fashion demands daily renewal of colours that fade quickly but leave permanent damage in their wake. You enter what can only be described as a medieval torture chamber, specifically designed for hair removal, where the pursuit of smooth, hairless skin has created practices so brutal they would make modern waxing salons seem like gentle spas. The air fills with the acrid smoke of burning resins and the occasional sharp cry of pain as women endure procedures that systematically destroy their hair follicles through methods involving molten wax, caustic chemicals, and heated metal implements. Here, in the most agonizing corner of medieval beauty culture, you're about to witness hair removal techniques that literally burn and scar their way to fashionable smoothness. The morning's hair removal ordeal begins with Lady Eleanor being positioned on what resembles a medieval operating table, complete with leather restraints that she grips tightly as Master Aldwin prepares his arsenal of hair destruction tools. The goal isn't simply removing unwanted hair. Medieval beauty standards demanded skin so perfectly smooth it appeared to have never grown hair at all, achieving the supernatural hairlessness that marked women as approaching angelic perfection. This required not just temporary removal, but permanent destruction of hair follicles through methods that bordered on controlled mutilation. You watch in fascination and horror as Master Aldwin begins heating his first weapon against unwanted hair, a mixture of tree resin and beeswax that must reach temperatures hot enough to melt metal before it becomes effective for medieval hair removal standards. The wax isn't ordinary candle material. It's a complex blend of pine resin harvested from trees struck by lightning, beeswax from hives maintained in monastery gardens, and rosin collected from ships that have survived storms at sea. Medieval hair removal theory insisted that wax mixed with materials blessed by divine intervention possessed the spiritual authority to permanently banish hair from noble flesh. The heating process requires constant attention and specific prayers, because medieval beauty manuals warned that improperly heated wax could lose its hair. Removal properties, or even worse, become cursed and cause hair to grow back thicker and darker than before. Master Aldwin uses a thermometer made from blessed mercury sealed in crystal tubes to ensure the wax reaches exactly the temperature that medieval alchemists called the melting point of vanity, hot enough to destroy hair roots, but theoretically not hot enough to kill the patient. But simple hot wax removal, agonizing as it might be, represents only the mildest form of medieval hair removal torture. For truly permanent results, Master Aldwin produces what he calls the lime of purification, a caustic paste made from quicklime mixed with ash from fires that burned only applewood blessed by priests during harvest festivals. This chemical mixture is so corrosive it can dissolve human tissue on contact, making it perfect for permanently destroying hair follicles that resist less extreme treatments. The lime paste preparation requires extraordinary care, as even tiny amounts of the mixture on healthy skin can cause chemical burns that leave permanent scars. Master Aldwin uses tools made from blessed bone to mix the caustic ingredients, because metal implements become corroded by the lime's destructive properties. The paste must be prepared while reciting prayers for protection from disfigurement, because medieval hair removal practitioners understood they were essentially applying controlled chemical burns to achieve beauty standards. You observe Lady Eleanor's expression as Master Aldwin begins applying the caustic paste to areas where previous waxing treatments have failed to permanently remove hair. The lime mixture creates an immediate burning sensation that makes her eyes water and her breath come in sharp gasps. But medieval beauty culture interpreted this pain as evidence that the treatment was successfully burning away the bestial nature that causes unwanted hair growth. The most extreme hair removal technique involves what Master Aldwin refers to as the branding of smoothness, heated metal implements designed to burn individual hair follicles so severely they can never produce hair again. These tools resemble miniature versions of the brands used to mark livestock, heated in fires made from charcoal blessed by bishops, and applied with precision that requires years of training to master without causing fatal burns. The metal branding process follows mapped patterns based on medieval theories of hair growth that located centers of follicle power at specific points on the human body. Master Aldwin uses charts derived from ancient Greek medical texts to identify exactly where each brand should be applied to achieve maximum hair destruction with minimum risk of death. The margin for error is virtually non-existent. Too light an application fails to destroy the hair root, while too heavy a burn can cause infections that kill the patient. Historians still argue whether extreme hair removal practices originated from religious ascetic traditions, where monks and nuns removed body hair as part of spiritual purification rituals, or if they developed from attempts to recreate the supernatural smoothness depicted on classical statues that medieval artists used as beauty ideals. Either way, the practices created a beauty culture that literally branded women's bodies in pursuit of impossible standards of hairless perfection. As the morning's hair removal session continues, Lady Eleanor's skin develops the exact smooth, scarred perfection that medieval beauty standards demanded. The combination of hot wax, caustic chemicals, and heated metal has created skin so damaged it can no longer grow hair, while the scarring creates a texture that medieval beauty manuals praised as the marble smoothness of divine femininity. The pain management during these procedures relied on what medieval medicine called beauty courage, the ability to endure extreme suffering without crying out or fainting. Women who could survive extensive hair removal treatments without showing distress were praised for their spiritual strength, and considered more attractive than those who demonstrated weakness during the procedures. Medieval beauty culture essentially made the ability to suffer gracefully into a form of sexual attraction. The economic cost of maintaining permanently smooth skin through medieval hair removal methods was astronomical. A single session required the services of skilled practitioners, expensive materials, and often weeks of recovery time during which the patient couldn't engage in normal activities. The specialized tools, blessed materials, and medical care needed to treat the inevitable complications made smooth skin a luxury available only to the wealthiest families. The most disturbing aspect of medieval hair removal was its permanent nature. Once women committed to these extreme treatments, they became trapped in cycles of increasingly severe procedures to maintain their results. The chemical burns and scarring damage made natural hair regrowth impossible, but also created skin so fragile it required constant care and regular touch-up treatments to maintain the appearance of healthy smoothness. When Master Aldwin completes the morning's hair removal session, Lady Eleanor's skin appears perfectly smooth and luminous, marked only by the subtle scarring that medieval beauty culture considered evidence of her commitment to true refinement. She's achieved the hairless perfection that medieval poets compared to polished marble or angel skin, though the price has been paid in permanent tissue damage and systematic destruction of her body's natural protective mechanisms. The aftercare for medieval hair removal involves applying salves made from honey mixed with ground pearls to soothe the chemical burns, while the branded areas receive treatments of blessed olive oil to prevent infections that could prove fatal. Recovery requires weeks of careful monitoring to ensure that the deliberate tissue damage doesn't develop into life-threatening complications. Tomorrow, Lady Eleanor will undergo maintenance treatments to address any hair follicles that survive today's destruction, because medieval hair removal standards demanded absolute perfection that required constant vigilance and regular renewal of the chemical and thermal damage that creates fashionable smoothness. You enter what resembles a medieval alchemist's laboratory, crossed with an exotic spice market, where the air itself seems to shimmer with aromatic oils so potent they create visible hazes that make your eyes water from their intensity. The walls are lined with hundreds of ceramic jars containing substances from the furthest reaches of the known world, while elaborate distillation apparatus bubbles and steams with liquids that cost more than the entire kingdoms. Here, in the most intoxicating corner of medieval beauty culture, you're about to witness perfume creation so elaborate and expensive that a single bottle could purchase a small army. Yet medieval women considered such fragrant luxury essential for achieving true feminine perfection. The morning's olfactory transformation begins with Lady Eleanor's personal perfume master, Brother Anselm, who maintains what may be Europe's most valuable collection of aromatic materials. His specialty involves creating scent combinations so complex they tell entire stories through fragrance, using ingredients so rare that acquiring them requires diplomatic negotiations with foreign emperors and trade agreements that span multiple continents. You watch as he opens his most precious storage containers, releasing aromas so intense they seem to transport you directly to distant lands filled with flowers that exist nowhere else on Earth. The foundation of today's perfume creation starts with what Brother Anselm calls the tears of paradise. Frankincense resin that has been blessed by the Patriarch of Jerusalem and carried by pilgrims who walked barefoot across desert sands to collect it from trees that grow in locations so sacred they are protected by military guards. Each piece of resin represents months of dangerous travel through territories controlled by various warring factions, making frankincense literally more valuable than gold by weight. But this isn't ordinary frankincense. These particular tears come from trees that grow on mountainsides where biblical prophets supposedly received divine visions, harvested only during specific lunar phases by monks who have taken vows of silence. The resin must be collected in containers made from cedar wood blessed by bishops, because contact with secular materials supposedly corrupts the spiritual purity that gives sacred frankincense its most precious olfactory properties. You observe Brother Anselm carefully selecting individual pieces of resin, examining each one for the perfect translucent golden colour that indicates maximum aromatic potency. Medieval perfume theory insisted that only frankincense tears shed during moments of divine ecstasy possessed the spiritual authority to create truly transformative fragrances. The selection process requires him to handle each piece while reciting prayers, because improper spiritual preparation could contaminate the resin and ruin entire batches of precious perfume. The frankincense preparation involves grinding the blessed resin using mortars made from stone quarried in the Holy Land, mixed with oils that have been extracted from flowers growing in monastery gardens where saints' relics are buried. The grinding releases aromatic compounds so intense they create clouds of scented smoke that perfume the entire castle, while the spiritual associations supposedly transform mere fragrance into a medium for divine communication. But frankincense alone, precious as it might be, cannot create the complex perfume compositions that medieval nobility demanded. The next component comes from sources so exotic they might as well be mythical: ambergris from sperm whales that have been hunted in Arctic waters by sailors who risk their lives battling sea monsters in pursuit of this substance that medieval perfumers called the ocean's gift to beauty. The ambergris arrives after journeys so dangerous that most hunting expeditions never return, carried by merchants who have survived storms, pirates, and encounters with creatures that medieval bestiaries describe as dragons dwelling beneath ocean waves. Each piece of ambergris represents the digestive secretions of whales, so enormous they're considered legendary beasts, processed through biological mechanisms that medieval science couldn't begin to understand, but recognized as producing the most valuable perfume ingredient in existence. Brother Anselm handles the ambergris using tools made from narwhal ivory, because medieval perfume theory held that materials from sea creatures possessed natural harmony with ocean-derived ingredients. The ambergris itself appears deceptively modest, greyish lumps that could be mistaken for weathered stones, yet contains aromatic compounds so complex they create fragrance effects that seem almost supernatural. Medieval perfumers discovered that ambergris doesn't just add scent to fragrances, it transforms and enhances every other aromatic component in ways that create entirely new olfactory experiences. Historians still argue whether the extreme medieval perfume practices originated from attempts to recreate the sacred incense used in Byzantine religious ceremonies, or if they developed from misunderstanding classical texts that describe the exotic fragrances worn by Eastern empresses and Egyptian queens. Either way, the practices created international trade networks dedicated entirely to transporting luxury aromatic materials across vast distances and through multiple political boundaries. The most exotic component of Lady Eleanor's perfume comes from animals so rare that medieval Europeans believed they were mythical creatures. Musk deer that inhabit mountain ranges so remote and dangerous that reaching them requires expeditions lasting years. The musk itself comes from glands that must be extracted from living animals during specific seasons, creating supply chains that involve specialized hunters who speak languages unknown to European scholars. The musk preparation requires extraordinary care, as the substance is so concentrated that a single drop can perfume an entire room for months. Brother Anselm uses scales so sensitive they can detect the weight of individual rose petals to measure out exactly the right amount of musk needed to balance the frankincense and ambergris without overwhelming the composition. Medieval perfume theory insisted that improper musk proportions could create fragrances so powerful they caused madness in anyone who smelled them. As Brother Anselm combines these impossibly precious ingredients, the laboratory fills with an aroma so complex and intoxicating, it seems to alter the very air itself. The fragrance doesn't simply smell pleasant, it creates olfactory experiences that seem to transport the consciousness to different realms, combining sacred animal and floral elements in ways that medieval perfumers believed could literally transform the wearer's spiritual nature through scent. The final perfume composition requires aging in containers made from crystal blessed by papal jewelers, stored in chambers where the temperature is maintained using fires that burn continuously with flames fed only by wood from trees that have never been struck by disease. The aging process takes exactly 7 lunar cycles, during which the perfume develops complexity that medieval perfumers compared to fine wines or sacred texts that reveal new meanings through contemplation. When Brother Anselm finally presents the completed perfume to Lady Eleanor, the fragrance represents approximately 10 years' wages for skilled craftsmen, concentrated into a volume small enough to hold in cupped hands. The scent is so powerful and complex it seems to tell entire stories through aroma. opening with sacred incense that evokes cathedral ceremonies, developing into exotic animal musks that suggest distant wilderness adventures, and finishing with floral notes so pure they seem to capture the essence of paradise gardens. The application of such precious perfume follows ritualized patterns that mirror religious ceremonies. Lady Eleanor allows exactly 3 drops to be applied to her wrists, 3 more behind her ears, and a final drop at the base of her throat, because medieval numerology declared 9 the perfect number for feminine fragrance. The perfume doesn't simply scent her skin, it creates an aromatic aura so powerful that people can detect her presence from several rooms away, while the complex fragrance evolution means she smells subtly different throughout the day as various aromatic components develop and fade. The economic implications of maintaining such extreme perfume standards literally shaped medieval international politics. The demand for exotic aromatic materials created diplomatic relationships with distant civilizations, while the enormous profits involved in perfume trading made aromatic merchants some of the wealthiest and most influential individuals in Europe. Wars were fought over control of trade routes that supplied luxury perfume ingredients. The most remarkable aspect of medieval perfume culture was its psychological and social effects. Women who wore such powerful fragrances became literally unforgettable, as the complex scents created permanent associations in the memories of everyone they encountered. Medieval perfume didn't just make women smell attractive, it transformed them into olfactory legends whose fragrances lingered in chambers long after they departed, and created lasting impressions that influenced political and romantic relationships for decades. Tomorrow, Lady Eleanor will apply fresh perfume from the same precious bottle, because medieval fragrance standards demanded that such extraordinary scents become daily expressions of wealth, sophistication, and spiritual refinement that marked their wearers as belonging to the highest levels of human civilization. You follow Lady Eleanor through an entire week of her beauty routines, watching as the days unfold in a carefully choreographed ballet of pain, poison, and precision that consumes nearly every waking moment of her existence. This is medieval beauty culture in its full, horrifying glory. A weekly cycle so elaborate and demanding that maintaining fashionable appearance becomes essentially a full-time occupation, requiring armies of servants, international supply chains, and financial resources that could support entire villages. You're about to witness how the pursuit of perfect femininity transformed noble women into living art projects that required constant maintenance to avoid complete collapse. Monday arrives with what Lady Eleanor's household calls Purification Day, beginning before dawn with the bloodletting treatments you've already witnessed, but extending far beyond simple cosmetic bloodletting into what resembles systematic medical torture disguised as beauty care. The morning starts with Master Aldrich applying fresh leeches to drain exactly the right amount of blood to create the perfect rosy complexion, but Monday's bloodletting extends to locations across her entire body: temples, wrists, ankles, and behind her ears, creating a network of controlled wounds that supposedly balance her humours while achieving the pale, ethereal appearance that marks true nobility. The Monday bloodletting session lasts nearly 4 hours, during which Lady Eleanor must remain perfectly still while dozens of leeches work their way across her skin and carefully controlled razor cuts drain blood, according to astrological charts that determine exactly how much life force should be removed on lunar Mondays versus solar Tuesdays. The blood loss leaves her dizzy and weak, but medieval beauty culture interpreted these symptoms as evidence of successful spiritual purification rather than dangerous medical procedures. Tuesday becomes Poison Day, when Lady Eleanor undergoes the most dangerous beauty treatments of her weekly cycle. This is when Master Geoffroy applies the mercury-laced face masks, arsenic powders, and lead-based cosmetics that will slowly kill her over the course of years while granting her the supernatural complexion that medieval beauty standards demanded. You watch as she submits to having her face painted with substances so toxic they would make modern hazmat teams evacuate buildings, all while maintaining the serene expression that marks properly bred, noble women. The Tuesday poisoning sessions require extraordinary courage, as Lady Eleanor must sit motionless for hours while caustic chemicals burn her skin and toxic vapours make everyone in the room nauseous. The mercury compounds create immediate neurological effects that make her hands shake and her vision blur, but medieval physicians interpreted these symptoms as evidence that the treatments were successfully awakening divine beauty powers within her flesh. Wednesday transforms into Modification Day, devoted entirely to the painful hair removal, forehead plucking and physical reshaping that creates the alien-like proportions medieval culture considered the height of feminine beauty. You observe as Master Aldwin spends the entire day systematically destroying hair follicles with hot wax, caustic chemicals, and heated metal brands, while simultaneously plucking her hairline back another fraction of an inch to maintain the impossibly high forehead that marks truly refined women. The Wednesday modification sessions often leave Lady Eleanor covered in chemical burns, branded scars, and areas of damaged skin that require weeks to heal properly. Medieval beauty culture celebrated these injuries as evidence of her commitment to true refinement, while the permanent scarring was considered attractive because it demonstrated her willingness to suffer for beauty in ways that separated noble women from their social inferiors. Thursday brings Luxury Day, when Lady Eleanor undergoes the elaborate bathing rituals involving mare's milk, honey, and exotic ingredients that cost more than most people's annual income. But Thursday's luxury extends beyond simple bathing to include full-body treatments with oils extracted from flowers that grow only in locations blessed by specific saints, massages using techniques passed down through generations of Eastern Orthodox monks, and aromatherapy sessions that involve burning incense worth more than war horses. The Thursday luxury treatments require the coordinated efforts of dozens of servants working in carefully choreographed sequences to maintain water temperatures, ingredient concentrations, and timing patterns that must align with astrological influences to achieve their full beautifying effects. The sessions last from dawn until sunset, during which Lady Eleanor exists in a state of pampered semi-consciousness, while her body absorbs expensive ingredients through every possible route. Friday becomes Artistry Day, devoted to the elaborate makeup applications that transform Lady Eleanor into something approaching a painted icon. You watch as Brother Franciscus spends the entire day applying layer after layer of toxic pigments, exotic kohl, and metallic powders that create the supernatural appearance medieval culture associated with angelic beings. The face painting alone requires 6 hours of careful work, during which Lady Eleanor cannot speak, eat, or move without risking damage to the artistic composition being created on her features. The Friday artistry sessions transform Lady Eleanor so completely that she becomes barely recognizable as the same person who began the week. Her face now appears carved from luminescent stone, with colours so intense they seem to glow with internal light, and proportions so altered from natural human features that she resembles the otherworldly figures depicted in religious manuscripts rather than an actual woman. Saturday arrives as Maintenance Day, when all of the week's beauty work receives careful attention to repair damage, touch up faded areas, and prepare for Sunday's final presentation, This involves reapplying cosmetics that have been absorbed or worn away, treating chemical burns in branded areas to prevent infection, and adjusting the complex systems of clothing, jewellery and accessories that support and enhance the artificial beauty created through 6 days of systematic self-torture. The Saturday maintenance sessions reveal the true fragility of medieval beauty standards. Without constant attention, Lady Eleanor's appearance would collapse within hours, the lead paint would flake away, the bloodletting effects would fade, the hair removal burns would become infected, and the elaborate perfume compositions would lose their complex aromatic balance. Maintaining fashionable appearance requires the same level of constant vigilance needed to maintain siege equipment or complex mechanical devices. Historians still argue whether the weekly beauty routine cycle originated from attempts to recreate the 7-day creation story through personal transformation, or if it developed from practical necessity as medieval women discovered that their extreme beauty practices required carefully timed recovery periods to prevent immediate death from cumulative toxicity. Either way, the practices created a lifestyle where beauty maintenance consumed virtually every available moment. Sunday culminates as Presentation Day, when Lady Eleanor displays the results of her week-long transformation at church services, court functions and social gatherings, where other noble women evaluate and compete over who has achieved the most perfect realization of medieval beauty ideals. The Sunday presentations function as both religious devotion and fashion warfare, where women display their wealth, dedication, and spiritual refinement through the evidence written on their artificially perfected bodies. The Sunday presentation requires Lady Eleanor to maintain perfect composure while wearing beauty treatments so painful and toxic they make normal human activities nearly impossible. She must sit through lengthy religious services while mercury poisoning makes her nauseous, smile graciously while lead-based cosmetics crack and flake from her face, and engage in social conversation while bloodletting induced weakness makes her dizzy and confused. By Sunday evening, Lady Eleanor has completed another cycle of medieval beauty culture that has cost more money than most nobles spend on military equipment, caused permanent damage to her health and appearance, and required the coordinated efforts of dozens of servants working with materials gathered from across the known world. Tomorrow she'll begin the entire cycle again, because medieval beauty standards demanded that such extraordinary artificial perfection become a permanent lifestyle rather than occasional luxury. The weekly beauty routine has transformed her into a living work of art that requires constant maintenance to avoid complete collapse, while systematically destroying her health, bankrupting her family, and consuming every moment of her existence in pursuit of standards so extreme they approach the supernatural. You stand in Lady Eleanor's chambers as the first grey light of dawn reveals the true cost of medieval beauty culture, where the pursuit of impossible perfection has created a woman who embodies both the highest achievements and the most tragic failures of her civilization's aesthetic ideals. After months of witnessing these elaborate daily rituals, you're finally seeing the ultimate consequences of beauty practices so extreme they transform their practitioners into living monuments to human vanity, monuments that inevitably crumble under the weight of their own artificial perfection. The morning light illuminates skin that appears luminescent and otherworldly, but closer examination reveals the terrible price of that supernatural beauty. Lady Eleanor's complexion, painted daily with lead and arsenic compounds, now bears the telltale signs of chronic heavy metal poisoning, a peculiar grey-green undertone that appears beneath the layers of toxic cosmetics, while her hands shake with the distinctive tremor that medieval physicians couldn't diagnose, but modern medicine would immediately recognize as neurological damage from systematic poison exposure. Her hair, transformed weekly with precious saffron treatments worth more than kingdoms, has begun falling out in patches where the expensive spice treatments have gradually destroyed the follicles through chemical burning. The remaining strands appear golden and luminous in candlelight, but feel brittle as dried leaves when touched, breaking at the slightest pressure. Medieval beauty culture celebrated this fragility as evidence of successful transformation toward angelic delicacy, not understanding that they were witnessing systematic destruction of natural human hair structure. You observe as Margot carefully applies the morning's cosmetics to a face that has been so altered by months of beauty treatments that Lady Eleanor no longer resembles her natural appearance. The lead-based face paints now require increasingly thick applications to cover the skin damage caused by previous applications, while the areas around her eyes bear permanent staining from mercury-based kohl that has penetrated so deeply into her tissues it can never be completely removed. The most disturbing aspect of Lady Eleanor's transformation lies in what medieval beauty culture has done to her mouth. The daily application of mercury-laden lip colours has created permanent discoloration that makes her natural lips appear almost black, while the toxic compounds have caused her gums to recede dramatically, creating a smile that reveals far too much tooth structure. Several of her teeth have developed the distinctive dark lines that indicate mercury poisoning, while others have simply fallen out entirely from the systematic acid treatments designed to create fashionable whiteness. Historians still argue whether medieval women understood the deadly nature of their beauty practices, or if the culture of feminine suffering was so deeply embedded that they accepted gradual poisoning as a reasonable price for achieving social acceptance and romantic attraction. Certainly the beauty manuals of the period contain warnings about excessive beauty drawing life force from the body, suggesting some awareness that these practices shortened women's lives dramatically. But perhaps most tragically, Lady Eleanor has become trapped in cycles of beauty maintenance that make normal life impossible. Her skin has become so dependent on daily applications of toxic cosmetics that allowing her natural complexion to show would reveal damage so severe it appears genuinely monstrous. The lead and arsenic treatments have created permanent discoloration, scarring, and tissue damage that requires constant concealment to maintain any appearance of normal humanity. The hair removal treatments have left her body covered with scars from chemical burns and heated metal applications, while the systematic destruction of hair follicles has created skin so sensitive it cannot tolerate normal clothing fabrics. She must wear specially prepared garments lined with silk that has been treated with blessed oils to prevent her damaged skin from breaking down further when exposed to ordinary textiles. The bloodletting treatments have left Lady Eleanor in a state of chronic anemia that makes normal physical activities impossible. She cannot walk upstairs without becoming breathlessly exhausted, cannot eat normal foods because her damaged digestive system can only process soft, bland substances, and cannot engage in ordinary conversation for extended periods because the neurological effects of mercury poisoning make concentration increasingly difficult. The financial cost of maintaining Lady Eleanor's beauty standards has destroyed her family's wealth entirely. The daily consumption of precious ingredients, exotic materials, and specialized services has required selling off lands, dismissing servants, and borrowing money at rates that guarantee eventual bankruptcy. Medieval beauty culture literally consumed fortunes in pursuit of temporary aesthetic effects that required constant renewal to maintain their impact. Yet despite these devastating consequences, Lady Eleanor cannot simply abandon the beauty practices that are destroying her life. Medieval social standards make her artificial appearance essential for maintaining her position in noble society, while the physical damage caused by years of beauty treatments makes her natural appearance so disturbing it would result in complete social ostracism. She's trapped between the slow death of continued beauty maintenance and the immediate social death that would result from revealing her true condition. The servants who maintain Lady Eleanor's beauty routines are themselves victims of these practices. Margot shows signs of chronic lead poisoning from handling cosmetics daily, while Master Aldrich has developed respiratory problems from breathing toxic fumes during beauty treatments. Brother Franciscus has lost several fingers to acid burns from pigment preparation, while Master Geoffroy suffers from mysterious neurological symptoms that medieval medicine attributes to excessive exposure to beautifying spirits. As you observe the morning's beauty preparations, you realize that Lady Eleanor's chamber has become a monument to human folly, a place where the pursuit of impossible perfection has created suffering so extensive it affects everyone connected to the process. The beauty culture that promised to transform women into divine beings has instead created systematic destruction, disguised as luxury and refinement. The most disturbing realization comes when you understand that Lady Eleanor's story represents thousands of similar women across medieval Europe, all trapped in the same cycles of toxic beauty practices that promise transcendence while delivering slow destruction. Medieval beauty culture created an entire generation of walking casualties whose artificial perfection masked systematic poisoning on a scale that approached genocide through cosmetics. But perhaps the cruelest aspect of medieval beauty culture lies in its ultimate futility. Despite all the pain, expense, and health destruction, the artificial beauty created through these extreme practices remains fundamentally temporary. The lead paints flake away, the mercury compounds fade, the bloodletting effects disappear, and the elaborate constructions of artificial femininity require constant renewal to maintain their impact. Lady Eleanor has sacrificed her health, wealth, and natural appearance to achieve beauty standards so extreme they approach the supernatural. Yet tomorrow she must begin the entire process again because medieval beauty culture offers no permanent solutions, only endless cycles of temporary transformation purchased through systematic self-destruction. The legacy of these medieval beauty practices echoes through centuries to influence modern culture in ways that most people never recognize. The contemporary obsession with impossible beauty standards, the acceptance of pain and expense as reasonable prices for aesthetic improvement, and the cultural equation of feminine worth with artificial physical perfection all trace their origins back to medieval chambers, where women like Lady Eleanor traded their lives for temporary beauty that satisfied social demands while destroying everything that made life worth living. As the morning light fully illuminates Lady Eleanor's transformed features, you witness both the ultimate achievement and the complete failure of medieval beauty culture. A woman who has successfully become everything her society demanded, while losing everything that made her human in the process. The candlelight grows softer now, flickering gently across the ancient stones as Lady Eleanor's story draws to its quiet close. You can feel the weight of centuries settling around you like a comfortable blanket, while the echoes of those long-ago beauty rituals fade into the peaceful darkness of time well past. The elaborate preparations, the precious ingredients, the daily transformations. All of it seems dreamlike now, floating away on the gentle currents of memory and imagination. Perhaps you're beginning to understand why these medieval women pursued such extreme beauty, even as the costs mounted beyond reason. Perhaps you're feeling grateful for the simple elegance of modern life, where beauty routines involve gentle cleansers instead of mercury poison, and where the most exotic ingredient in your skincare might be vitamin C, rather than crushed beetles and lead paint. Or perhaps you're simply drifting now, carried along by the rhythm of ancient stories that speak to something timeless in the human desire to transform, to beautify, to become something more than ordinary flesh and bone. The castle chambers grow quiet as the servants extinguish their torches and the beauty tools are carefully cleaned and stored away. Lady Eleanor's reflection fades from the polished silver mirrors, while the scents of frankincense and rosewater gradually give way to the simple smell of stone and thyme. These medieval women, with their impossible beauty standards and their dangerous devotions to artificial perfection, rest now in the peaceful silence of history, their stories preserved like pressed flowers between the pages of time. Sleep comes gently in such ancient places, where the weight of human folly and human aspiration settle into comfortable understanding, and where the endless pursuit of beauty finally finds its rest in the simple acceptance of dreams.